Buddy, I'm so sorry, but I need that chair.
In one of my videos, I talked about choice paralysis and how the freedom to be able to do everything and all at once can be petrifying. It feels like a contradiction. Freedom must necessarily lead to freedom, right? But turns out life is not that simple. And because it isn't, it's on us to make it so. Now, I'm personally a busybody. I love to learn new things, eat new food, try out new sports, and pick up new hobbies. I've worked many different jobs, taught myself to play several instruments. I'm fairly fit through a number of different sports and dance styles. I can build my own furniture, I can create my own YouTube videos, I can write poems, I can pick locks, and I can tie my own shoes. Did I do all of this out of pure curiosity? Yes, and I wouldn't trade that spirit for anything. But here's the catch. I used to say yes to everything that sparked my interest, without pausing to ask if I had the time, space, and emotional energy for it. I piled things on like a kid at a buffet, fascinated by all the colors and flavors, but eventually sick from the excess. And the worst part is that I didn't even get good in any of it so far. Because I spread myself so incredibly thin that I never gave myself the time to focus on one thing for long enough. And that's the whole point of this video. In order to truly reap the benefits of our endeavors, we need to simplify our approach to whatever it is that we are attempting and stick with that for a while. If you're all over the place like I always was and in some regards still am, you will stumble around endlessly in the dark and just get exhausted without ever actually getting anywhere. I've worked myself into anxiety and frustration, not because of the initial curiosity, but because I treated it like a race to mastery or a checklist to be socially impressive. And eventually I ended up feeling like nothing I did was ever enough. Like I was never enough. And that's sad because I am enough just by being an emotionally intelligent and considerate human being. And you are too. And that's not setting the bar low and being complacent about yourself. This simple but benevolent relationship to yourself won't make your life more boring. Done right, it can lead to a life lived deliberately and with integrity. A life that stands on firm ground from which to jump off of every now and then. With intention and conviction, and not just with boastful words and actions whose echo grows pale in the vacuum. Now, before we figure out how to simplify things though, we need to first figure out why exactly we would want to simplify in the first place. If you remember the passage from Plato's Republic about the pitfalls of having no rules to abide to, of being able to do what you want and when you want it, and of not having to fear repercussions for a little bit of anarchy, you might recall that the same properties of endless freedom can leave one exhausted and overwhelmed, and begging for commands from a higher power to bring some order into an unruly life that fell completely out of line and into a chaotic mess. Cue religion. I'm not religious, but I do think that classical Christianity has figured that one out. According to Thomas Aquinas, even God himself is infinitely simple. This is not exactly the reason why especially the Christian religion is keeping it simple, but they are minimalists at heart nonetheless, which makes space for prayer and contemplation. Because simplicity isn't about having less, it's about having more of what matters. And if you watched my videos about endless freedom and saying no, then you already know the drill. When there's too much of everything, then none of those single things holds any value anymore. Everything just seems to be insignificant and replaceable. And would you yourself like to be insignificant and replaceable? I bet not. I bet you would prefer that your friends are seeing you as one of a few well-chosen partners in crime, instead of one of their 300 plus Facebook acquaintances that they haven't even met in real life. No one wants to compete for attention, and your hobbies and your health are no exception, because they barely can develop fertile ground if they don't get enough quality time, just like your relationships. And that insight is old news, by the way. Simplicity hasn't just recently become a highly valued virtue. It's rated 10 out of 10 since over 2,500 years, with our good old Greeks once again being one of the first to rave about it, together with like-minded Taoists over in ancient China. Epictetus, whom you might have encountered when stumbling over some snippets of stoicism in your Instagram feed lately, said that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And very similar sounded the timeless wisdom of Epicurus, who saw the life of happiness, but not in a reckless way hedonism tried to push on us, and instead with emphasis on necessary desires such as food, shelter, and friendship, in contrast to unnecessary ones such as luxury, power, or fame. He argued that, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you need luxury to be happy, you will always be at its mercy. But if you can enjoy simple things, you will never feel deprived. Because the simple things in life are plentiful, like a good book or enjoyable music, or that pop when you open a fresh jar of pickles. Now, simplicity is not just an abstract idea that is nice to muse about over a mouthful of olives though. It has proven very effective in making modern real real-life headaches easier to mitigate. For example, many martial arts like judo or aikido emphasize efficiency over force, using minimal movement to achieve maximum impact. I learned the importance of simplifying movement firsthand when I took a Krav Maga class once. While I was almost throwing up over exhaustion from my fancy footwork, I was told to take it easy, because a sex offender sadly doesn't care for a flashy performance. It's best to preserve your energy for the strongest groin scruncher possible when it actually counts. Emergency responders also know too well that unnecessary details can lead to heartbreaking complications. After stating the place and the nature of your incident, there's really no need to over-explain how exactly you allegedly ended up in the alligator enclosure of the Staten Island Zoo at 3 a.m. on a Sunday. It just makes it take longer until you get out of there again. And lastly, modern warfare has gotten an upgrade through a downgrade via the KISS principle, which stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. KISS is a design principle fostered by American military aviation engineers to guide them in keeping aircraft so stupidly simple in their makeup that they could easily be repaired by an average mechanic in the field under combat conditions and with only a handful of tools, because anything other than simple could actually become deadly. Now, while simplicity as a survival strategy might not seem applicable to you personally, it can positively influence how you navigate your daily life in more common areas as well. Stripping away the unnecessary isn't just an advantage for airplanes. Its underrated powers can aid in personal decision-making, creative expression, and living space aesthetics just as well. And of course, visually, it is a matter of taste. If you prefer this over that, and this over that, then fair enough. Depending on whether you grew up in an arcade center in Japan or an off-gray colored slab construction in the GDR, simplicity can indeed spell either beauty and purity or a dull and boring lack of nuances. But you know who doesn't see it as a matter of taste? Your brain. The human brain has a finite amount of cognitive resources, and because of that it finds more pleasure in simplicity, as in order, symmetry, rhythm, and unicolored sweatshirts. In most instances, a cluttered, overloaded, and chaotic existence is overwhelming for your gray matter, because there's no rock to hold on to anymore in the troubled waters that life often wants to drown us in. Our mind craves harmony, because it is constantly trying to make sense of the world with as minimal effort as possible, and who can blame it for that? Did you know that the average adult brain consumes more than 100 times as much energy as a standard smartphone on a daily basis? Sensory inputs make up a huge portion of our cognitive workload and eat up a lot of that energy. Luckily, our brain can never be completely depleted, but the insane amount of energy needed to process certain stimuli can make it almost impossible to relax to free jazz while already suffering from a racing mind. I really can't compute that. It's like accidentally starting way too many YouTube videos at the same time. The mental fatigue from feeding your brain too much free jazz can lead to anxiety, irritability, and burnout. Because the constant bombardment of unpredictable, high-energy stimuli leaves little room for rest or recovery, diminishing the brain's capacity to process information in a coherent way. This creates a heightened state of stress, as your mind continuously scrambles to keep up with the disjointed rhythms in your life, without ever finding a moment to settle into a comfortable flow. It is therefore strongly recommended to tone it down a notch, to offer our minds some well-deserved time off. Something minimalist artists, composers, and architects, and especially the Scandinavians, have understood intuitively. Now, surprisingly, it is way harder to keep things simple than to overcomplicate them. A well-known quote accredited to many important people of the past is, "I didn't have the time to make it shorter." Any copywriter knows how excruciatingly painful it can be to have a 5-word restriction for creating a headline worthy of the Cannes Lions Award. Less is more, because there is more value in less relative to the amount of something than there is in more. Let me know in the comments if you got what I mean by that. And the same is true for visual designs. It is much harder to create something well-rounded and harmonious and, most importantly, striking, with fewer lines or fewer colors or fewer objects, because each of those chosen few has to be at just the right spot to make the thing credible. Just one dot slightly out of line can turn a simple design from ingenious to inelegant. And when you put some extra embellishments into your personalized emergency exit sign, no one will know where to run to when your pants caught fire from sitting too close to the incense burner during a group meditation. And the same again is true for life in general. Finding out what truly matters and leaving it at that is much harder than thoughtlessly putting every buffet option on your plate. It requires self-reflection, a lot of discipline, and often also the courage to say no and to remain true to that. And the more you put on that plate, the harder it gets to find that one thing of true importance once you eventually actually feel the strain of that overload. If you are depressed, for example, and your life is filled with an insane amount of people and activities and responsibilities, then you might never find out which of these people or activities or responsibilities actually depresses you. You have to declutter first to really know what is good for you and what's either redundant or even detrimental. In any case, an unnecessary surplus of add-ons takes energy to process. In mild cases, for example, when looking at a kitschy painting, that can lead to confusion and visual fatigue. But in severe cases, for example, when it comes to relationships, it can lead to emotional exhaustion and a lack of clarity about who and what truly matters to you and why. Maybe even making you not appreciate the people in your life anymore that actually deserve it. When we reduce unnecessary complexity, we make space for creativity, focus, and peace of mind. Literally. Now, don't get me wrong here though. This video is neither meant to encourage you to quit striving for something more than a status quo, nor to justify the life of a couch potato. Thus, we need to establish what we mean by simplicity and how we distinguish between this kind of simple and this kind of simple. Simplicity is not about cutting out everything, but about omitting the things that aren't necessary in order to have space at your disposal for the important stuff and the energy to truly promote those chosen things. Like the electronic salesman Earl Madman Munz did when he slowly started chopping away at the electronic intestines of early television receivers to see with how little expensive material he could get away with before the device started malfunctioning. Not the most honorable business practice, but smart nonetheless. Or think Steve Jobs' wardrobe. Jobs decided that attire is not a focal point in his life, and in intentionally simplifying it to the utmost extreme, he enabled himself to have enough cognitive energy to set the stage for doom scrolling instead. Now, after establishing that simplicity is not limiting, but actually freeing and quality enhancing, we can finally figure out how to simplify. Nietzsche criticized the modern world for drowning in distractions, making it very clear that we still don't embrace an Epicurean lifestyle, because we as a collective simply don't learn from past struggles. It's almost comical. So how can we do our best to show Nietzsche that we got this? First, you need to identify what actually matters to you and why. And don't get too stressed out about unearthing the absolute truth here and now. Life is in a constant flux, and what is important to you today might not be tomorrow, and that's totally fine. But every phase you go through comes with its own priorities. So know thyself. Secondly, reduce the noise. Everything that has no business in those priorities goes into the recycling bin. Limit your hobbies, limit your subscriptions, limit your artistic choices, and limit the friendships you cultivate. The latter might sound harsh, but ask yourself every now and then whether you maintain some relationships just out of guilt or obligation. Life is short, and every day spent with someone that brings you down is a day not spent with someone that elevates and brings out the best in you. And again, this doesn't have to be a forever choice. When you change, all these things can change over time with you. And lastly, create a framework to adhere to your new simple way of being. For example, create daily rituals like a fixed morning routine. Create rules that make certain activities less arbitrary and thus less likely to take up more space than they have the right to. Like scheduling at what time you read emails or reducing the amount of colors that you buy your clothes in. Create your living environment in a way that supports your healthy habits. And lastly, declutter your desktop, your schedule, and your inner monologue. If you want to simplify all those suggestions into one concise guiding principle, I think it should be quality over quantity. I personally started simplifying my life for exactly that reason, to focus all my efforts on the quality and not the quantity of my work, my relationships, and my health. After suffering from severe burnout and panic attacks about 2 years ago, and having had consistent anxiety ever since from all the artificial obligations I put on myself, I decided that nuts and an apple are the perfect snack to have every single day, that the only thing my face truly needs is sunscreen, that I don't have to make my own painting panels from scratch and can save time and sanity with pre-made ones, that I don't need to buy green oil paint because I already have blue and yellow, that the only product my online store needs are classy prints on classy paper, and that the only thing my future truly needs is love. Simplicity is a way to reclaim control over your life. By choosing fewer, more meaningful pursuits, you create purpose instead of being overwhelmed by endless options, to the point of burnout, decision fatigue, and also overconsumption. Your wallet will truly thank you for keeping your number of shoes to a solid 5. Cutting excess spending allows you to invest in things that bring long-term fulfillment rather than short-term pleasure. This financial limitation also gives you the ability to sometimes splurge on the really good stuff without too much guilt and instead with true joy for the thing you just splurged on. Everything becomes more harmonious when you circumvent the clutter. A painting is less of an eye strain with less colors. Music is less of a cacophony with less notes and instruments. A tattoo is less of a grey slob with less cluttering details. Your weekend is more harmonious with less obligations, and your head with less to-do lists, making space for the things that are true non-negotiables. Like a game of chess with a girlfriend on every single Saturday morning since the day you became a couple. Now, let me know in the comments if I could have made this video more simple. Tell your loved ones that you simply love them. And if you feel discouraged by the idea of simplifying your life in its entirety, start by simply staying curious. Thanks for watching. I don't want to insult anyone's taste, but I really don't get it. We need to figure out why we want to figure things out. Why did I put so many tongue twisters in this one? Especially the Canadians, the Scandinavians. Music is better with less music. Yes!